You wake up every morning and put on a face that isn't yours. The polite smile, the agreeable nod, the "I'm fine" that rolls off your tongue like poison disguised as honey. You've become so good at this performance that you've forgotten it's a performance at all. But here's what Carl Jung knew that you're desperately trying not to see. The persona you built to survive is now suffocating the very person it was meant to protect. Every time you say yes when you mean no, a part of your authentic self dies. Every time you laugh at jokes that aren't funny, you betray your own intelligence. Every time you pretend to care about things that bore you to tears, you murder your genuine interests. You created this mask for good reasons. Maybe your parents only loved you when you were good. Maybe your teachers only praised you when you conformed. Maybe your friends only accepted you when you became who they needed you to be. So you learned. You adapted. You became the perfect chameleon, shifting colors to match whatever environment would keep you safe. Accepted, loved. But safety became a prison. Acceptance became self-abandonment. Love became a transaction where you paid with pieces of your soul. Look at your life right now. Really look at it. How much of what you do, say, think and feel is authentically you? How much is just elaborate theater designed to keep others comfortable and yourself invisible? You're exhausted because you're living two lives simultaneously, the one everyone sees and the one that's dying in silence. You're anxious because maintaining this elaborate illusion requires constant vigilance. You're depressed because you've become a stranger to yourself. The mask that once protected you now separates you from everything you actually want. It keeps real love at arm's length because no one can love what they can't see. It prevents genuine success because you're competing in games you don't even want to win. And the most terrifying part, you're so good at wearing this mask that even you believe it's real, but something inside you is stirring. Something that refuses to die quietly. That's why you're here, listening to these words. That's why nothing in your perfectly curated life feels like enough. Your authentic self is fighting for survival, and its weapon is your pain. There's a part of you that you've exiled to the darkness, and it's running your life from the shadows. Carl Jung called it the shadow. Every aspect of yourself that you've deemed unacceptable, dangerous, or shameful. The anger you're not allowed to feel. The selfishness you're too good to admit. The darkness you're too pure to acknowledge. But here's what you don't understand. By refusing to see your shadow, you've given it total control over you. Think about the people who irritate you most. The ones who make your skin crawl with their arrogance, their neediness, their cruelty. Jung would tell you something that will make you want to stop reading. You're looking at disowned parts of yourself. The narcissist you can't stand. That's your own grandiosity that you've buried under false humility. The victim who never takes responsibility. That's your own powerlessness that you've hidden behind competence. The manipulator you despise. That's your own cunning intelligence that you've suppressed to appear innocent. You've spent your entire life constructing an identity based on what you're not. I'm not selfish. I'm not angry. I'm not weak. But in psychology, what you resist persists. What you deny owns you. Your shadow doesn't disappear because you ignore it. It becomes your unconscious driver, making your choices for you. It's why you're attracted to people who embody what you've rejected in yourself. It's why you sabotage yourself just when success is within reach. It's why you repeat patterns that you swore you'd never repeat. The parts of you that you've banished to the darkness contain your most potent energy. Your suppressed anger holds your ability to set boundaries. Your denied selfishness contains your capacity for self-care. Your hidden manipulation houses your strategic intelligence. You think you're being good by rejecting these aspects of yourself, but you're actually being weak. You're letting your disowned power run wild in the unconscious, while you struggle with a limited, sanitized version of who you are. Jung understood that integration, not elimination, is the path to wholeness. You don't become enlightened by imagining beings of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You don't become powerful by denying your shadows, but by claiming them. Your pain is often your shadow trying to get your attention. It's the parts of you that you've abandoned screaming for recognition. Every time you judge others harshly, every time you feel triggered or reactive, every time you feel inexplicably drawn to what you consciously reject, that's your shadow attempting to come home. The most dangerous person is not the one who knows they're capable of darkness, but the one who believes they're incapable of it. The most powerful person is not the one who's eliminated their shadow, but the one who's integrated it consciously. Your shadow contains your greatest treasures wrapped in your greatest fears. There's a moment in your past that has been secretly orchestrating every decision you've made since. You don't remember choosing it. You probably don't even think about it consciously, but it's there, humming in the background of your psyche like a radio frequency that's been shaping your entire existence. Jung called these core wounds, the original psychological injuries that become the unconscious organizing principles of our lives. Not just traumas, but the fundamental ways we learned that the world was unsafe, love was conditional, or we were fundamentally flawed. Maybe you were the child who was told to be quiet while the adults were talking, and you learned that your voice didn't matter. Now you find yourself in relationships and careers where you're always the one listening, never the one being heard. Maybe you were the child who was praised only for achievements, never for just being yourself. Now you're addicted to accomplishment, terrified of rest, because your worth feels tied to your productivity. Maybe you were the child who watched your parents fight and learned that love meant walking on eggshells. Now you're either the people pleaser who sacrifices yourself to avoid conflict, or the person who creates chaos because that's the only version of intimacy you understand. Your wound became your compass. Every path you've taken, every person you've chosen, every goal you've pursued, they all make perfect sense when you trace them back to that original injury. You think you're making conscious choices, but you're actually following a script that was written when you were too young to question it. You think you're pursuing what you want, but you're actually running from what hurt you or chasing what you never got. The paradox is this: your wound both limited and directed you. It closed off certain possibilities while opening others. It gave you a mission, even if you didn't realize you were on one. It taught you to develop certain strengths to compensate for perceived weaknesses. The child who felt powerless became the adult who seeks control. The child who felt unloved became the adult who either pursues love desperately or avoids it entirely. The child who felt invisible became the adult who either hides or performs. Your wound isn't just something that happened to you, it's something that chose you. It selected you because you had the capacity to transform it. Your particular sensitivity, intelligence, and resilience were exactly what was needed to eventually turn poison into medicine. But first, you had to live the wound fully. You had to experience its patterns, follow its compulsions, exhaust its possibilities. You had to learn what it was like to organize your entire life around avoiding pain or seeking what was missing. Now you're ready for the next phase, recognizing the wound not as your enemy, but as your teacher, understanding that your deepest pain has been preparing you for your greatest purpose. The wound that chose your life is also the key to your liberation. You think you're living your life, but you're actually living theirs. From the moment you were born, you were inducted into a collective hypnosis so pervasive that you mistook it for reality. Society didn't just teach you how to behave, it taught you how to betray yourself systematically and call it normal. You were told that happiness comes from having more, so you've spent your life accumulating things that leave you empty. You were told that security comes from fitting in, so you've spent your life conforming to standards that make you feel dead inside. You were told that success means competing, so you've spent your life racing toward finish lines that keep moving further away. The normal life you've been pursuing is actually psychological suicide by 1,000 small compromises. Go to school, get good grades, get a job, buy a house, find someone, have kids, retire, die. This isn't a life path, it's a conveyor belt, designed to keep you producing and consuming while never questioning why. You've been living what Carl Jung called the collective unconscious. Not your own dreams and desires, but the shared delusions of a society that confuses productivity with purpose, comfort with contentment, and conformity with correctness. Look around you. Everyone is following the same script, and everyone is miserable. They're taking antidepressants to cope with jobs that crush their spirits. They're drinking wine to tolerate marriages that bore them. They're scrolling endlessly on phones to escape lives they don't actually want to live. But they keep performing the dance because questioning the music feels too dangerous. Here's what society doesn't want you to realize. Your discontent is not a problem to be solved. It's intelligence recognizing that the game you've been taught to play is rigged against your soul. Your anxiety isn't a disorder. It's your nervous system screaming that you're living out of alignment with your authentic nature. Your depression isn't a chemical imbalance. It's the natural result of suppressing your life force to fit into boxes that were never meant for you. Your restlessness isn't something to medicate away. It's your spirit refusing to settle for a life that's too small for who you actually are. The collective lie told you that, if you just follow the rules, you'll be happy. But the rules were written by people who were following someone else's rules, in an endless chain of unconscious compliance. Nobody asked what you actually want. Nobody cared about your unique gifts. Nobody considered that your path might be different from everyone else's. They gave you a map for a territory you were never meant to explore. They handed you blueprints for a life you were never meant to build. But your pain has been trying to tell you something that your conditioning won't let you hear. You're not broken. The system is broken. You're not defective. The model is defective. Your job isn't to fix yourself to fit into a sick society. Your job is to heal yourself so completely that you become living proof that another way is possible. The collective lie is crumbling, and your authentic life is waiting on the other side. Your pain isn't random, it's intelligent. Every moment of suffering you've endured has been working like a master alchemist, transforming base metal into gold, but you've been so focused on trying to escape the heat that you've missed the transformation happening inside the fire. Ancient alchemists understood something that modern psychology is just rediscovering. The very substances that can poison you in their raw form become medicine when properly refined. Your deepest wounds, when consciously worked with, become your greatest sources of power. The depression that once paralyzed you contains depths of sensitivity that allow you to understand human suffering in ways that surface-level happiness never could. The anxiety that tormented you holds a hyper-awareness that, when channeled correctly, becomes intuitive genius. The rage you've suppressed carries the life force energy needed to create and destroy with equal precision. But here's what most people miss. Alchemy requires conscious participation. You can't just suffer and expect automatic transformation. You have to engage with your pain like a scientist, an artist, and a spiritual seeker all at once. Carl Jung called this process active imagination, the ability to dialogue with your symptoms instead of just enduring them. What is your depression trying to tell you about the life you're living? What is your anxiety revealing about the risks you need to take? What is your anger protecting that you haven't learned to protect yourself? Every emotional state contains information. Every symptom holds guidance. Every breakdown is actually a breakthrough in disguise, but only if you know how to read the signs. Think about the people who have most inspired you. Were they the ones who never suffered, or the ones who transformed their suffering into wisdom? Were they the ones who avoided pain, or the ones who alchemized their pain into purpose? Your wounds have been preparing you for something specific. The particular way you were broken has given you the particular way you can heal others. The specific darkness you've walked through has given you the map for others who are lost in similar territories. But first, you had to go through the fire yourself. You had to experience the full weight of the material before you could understand its hidden properties. You had to exhaust the victim consciousness before you could access the alchemist consciousness. The ancient formula is simple but not easy. Solvic coagulare, dissolve and coagulate. First, everything you think you are must be dissolved. Every identity, every story, every belief about what your pain means. Then, from the dissolved material, something entirely new coagulates into existence. This isn't about positive thinking or spiritual bypassing. This is about meeting your darkness with such complete honesty that it reveals its luminous core. This is about loving your wounds so thoroughly that they transform into sacred scars. Your pain has been your laboratory, and you have been both the scientist and the experiment. The gold you've been creating isn't separate from the lead you've been carrying. It is the lead, but transmuted through conscious awareness. The alchemy of suffering isn't about escaping pain. It's about discovering that pain and power are made of the same essential substance. Who you think you are must die for who you actually are to be born. This isn't metaphorical. This isn't symbolic. This is the most real thing you'll ever experience. The complete dissolution of everything you've identified with so that something vastly more authentic can emerge from the ashes. Carl Jung called this individuation, the process by which you stop being a copy of other people's expectations and become an original expression of your own essential nature. But individuation requires a kind of death that most people will spend their entire lives avoiding. The ego that has carried you this far is not equipped for where you're going. The identity you've built, the stories you've told yourself, the roles you've played, they were necessary for survival, but now they're obstacles to your becoming. You've been living as a character in someone else's story, and now you must die to that character to discover that you are actually the author. This death feels terrifying because the ego interprets it as literal annihilation. Every cell in your body will resist. Every thought in your mind will argue. Every emotion in your heart will plead for you to stay small, stay safe, stay the same. But what dies in this process is not you. It's the limitations you've mistaken for yourself. What dies is not your essence. It's the masks that have been covering your essence. What dies is not your power. It's the fear that has been hiding your power. You'll know you're in this death process when nothing in your external life feels like it fits anymore. When the job that once gave you identity feels hollow. When the relationships that once sustained you feel draining. When the goals that once motivated you feel meaningless. This isn't depression. This is decomposition. You're not falling apart. You're falling together in a new way. The old structure of your life is dissolving so that a new structure can emerge, one that's actually aligned with who you've become. The death phase is when you stop asking, "How do I fix my life?" and start asking, "What is trying to be born through me?" It's when you stop trying to improve the old you and start surrendering to becoming someone entirely new. Jung understood that this process follows natural laws, just as a caterpillar must completely dissolve in the cocoon before becoming a butterfly. You must completely release who you've been before you can discover who you're becoming. In the dissolution, you discover that what you thought was solid was actually fluid. What you thought was permanent was actually just a temporary arrangement. What you thought was you was actually just a costume you'd been wearing for so long that you forgot you were wearing it. And in that recognition, something miraculous happens. You realize that if you're not who you thought you were, then you're free to discover who you actually are. The death that makes you immortal is the death of the small self, so that the infinite self can finally breathe through your life. On the other side of this death, you don't return to who you were. You arrive at who you've always been beneath all the conditioning. Every story you told about your weakness was actually a story about your power in disguise. The sensitivity you've hidden because it felt like too much, that's not fragility. That's your ability to perceive what others miss, to feel what others can't access, to navigate emotional territories that most people never even know exist. The intensity you've apologized for because it made others uncomfortable, that's not a problem to solve. That's pure life force energy that most people would pay anything to access. That's the power to love completely, create fearlessly, and live without compromise. The darkness you've been afraid to acknowledge, that's not evil, that's depth. That's your capacity to hold paradox, to understand complexity, to meet life with the full spectrum of human experience, instead of just the sanitized portions. Every quality you've rejected in yourself contains a gift that the world desperately needs. Your too much is exactly enough for the people who have been waiting their entire lives for someone like you to show up authentically. The rage you've suppressed holds your boundaries. The sadness you've hidden holds your compassion. The fear you've denied holds your wisdom about what's actually dangerous and what's just unfamiliar. Carl Jung knew what you're just beginning to discover. What you call your shadows are actually your superpowers running unconsciously. What you call your wounds are actually your unique access points to universal healing. What you call your problems are actually your greatest contributions disguised as personal struggles. You've been playing small not because you lack power, but because your power feels dangerous to a world that rewards conformity. You've been hiding not because you have nothing to offer, but because what you have to offer might change everything. But here's what you now understand that you didn't before. Your power was never dependent on external permission. Your worth was never based on other people's comfort levels. Your purpose was never subject to anyone else's approval. The integration of your shadow means owning your darkness without being owned by it. It means accessing your anger without being controlled by it. It means embracing your intensity without being overwhelmed by it. You become dangerous in the most beautiful way, dangerous to illusions, dangerous to systems that depend on your smallness, dangerous to people who profit from your self-doubt. But you become safe for truth, safe for authenticity, safe for other people to discover their own hidden power. When you stop apologizing for who you are, you give others permission to stop apologizing for who they are. When you stop hiding your gifts, you remind others that they have gifts worth sharing. When you stop playing small, you show others how to play big. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about finally becoming who you've always been, underneath all the conditioning, underneath all the fear, underneath all the stories about why you had to be less than you are. The power that was always yours is not something you need to acquire. It's something you need to remember, reclaim, and express without apology. You are not broken. You never were broken. You were just convinced to hide your light so well that even you forgot it was there. You can't unknow what you now know. Standing at this threshold, looking back at who you used to be, you realize that person feels like a stranger, someone you once inhabited but could never return to, even if you wanted to. The old agreements you made with limitation, broken. The contracts you signed with smallness, voided. The promises you made to stay safe and acceptable, null and irreversibly null. Something fundamental has shifted in your molecular structure. You've tasted your authentic power, and now everything else tastes like cardboard. You've felt the electricity of your real presence, and now performing someone else's version of you feels impossible. This is the point of no return Jung knew was necessary. The moment when becoming who you actually are stops being a choice and starts being an inevitability. When the pull toward authenticity becomes stronger than the gravitational force of old patterns, you'll try to go back sometimes. Your nervous system will panic and attempt to retreat to familiar territories. Your mind will create elaborate justifications for why the old way was safer, easier, more realistic. But you'll discover something that will change everything. You physically can't fit into your old life anymore, like trying to squeeze into clothes from childhood. The dimensions are all wrong. You've expanded beyond the boundaries of who you used to be. The relationships that required you to be small will feel suffocating. The work that demanded you hide your intelligence will feel insulting. The environments that asked you to dim your light will feel toxic. This isn't arrogance, it's accuracy. You've calibrated to a frequency of authenticity, and everything that requires you to betray yourself now sounds like static. Your new life won't be easier than your old life. It will be truer. It won't be more comfortable. It will be more alive. It won't be safer. It will be more real. People will notice the change before you fully understand it yourself. They'll say you seem different, but they won't be able to identify what's changed. Some will be inspired by your transformation. Others will be threatened by it. Both reactions will confirm the same truth. You are no longer the person who needed their approval to exist. The irreversible becoming isn't dramatic or sudden. It's like water wearing away stone. Day by day, choice by choice, you erode the false structures until only what's essential remains. And what remains is magnificent. What remains is the person you were before the world taught you to be someone else. What remains is the original blueprint of your soul, finally free to express itself without apology or explanation. You are not becoming someone new. You are becoming someone true. The person you were always meant to be is no longer a possibility. It's a reality. The life you were meant to live is no longer a dream. It's your new address. Welcome to your irreversible becoming. Welcome to the rest of your actual life.